Hi, and welcome back to another eLead video presented by Student Activities and Involvement here at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Today we'll be talking about transitioning leaders in that process. So when you're transitioning leaders, there's a couple things you want to consider. The main thing is whether you are a current or new officer. So if you're current officer, you want to think about if you're leaving the position or if you're staying. Because some people get reelected to their positions. So you want to think about, are you leaving your position or you're staying? If you're leaving, how will you leave your position gracefully? Or how will you ensure that your replacement is prepared to continue in your position? There's a lot of other questions too, just figuring out what will give you closure in this whole experience. What will set the new people up for success? What challenged you? What worked good? What didn't? Just consider all those questions that you may have. However, if you're a new officer, you want to consider, what do you need to know in order to be effective in your new role? How will you hit the ground running and pick up where the last officer left off? You also want to think about, where can you get help when officers leave unexpectedly or without giving you the support and resources you need? These are very valid questions, and coming into a new role, there's a lot going on in your mind. You have a lot of ideas, but it can be very difficult starting off and getting things going. So if you're taking on a leadership role, so if you're a new officer, you want to try and clarify and understand your role's purpose and responsibilities, whether that's looking at the Constitution, looking at what old officers have done, what the one that's leaving has done, all that stuff. You also want to become involved in the planning process as early as possible. The sooner you start, the better your programs might be, the better chances you have at reserving a space, the more likely you'll get a lot of involvement. Just the overall improvement of planning and organization for events or community service or that kind of stuff is very essential with starting early and getting plans going. You also want to have a foundational knowledge of your organization's history and purpose. So understanding the history, seeing how the organization has grown and moved through time or changed activities, excuse me, and just understanding the purpose and like, what's the org's goal? What do we plan on achieving year after year? Just considering all that and just writing it down. But if you're transitioning out of your leadership role, you want to make yourself available to the new officer or officers, depending on the position or depending on what you've been doing, just making yourself available for questions. You want to consider closure to be and many people consider closure to be immensely important for org officers, just to have that feeling of, I have served my time, I have passed it off successfully, it is now their time to continue on. And you also want to reflect on some of the challenges and successes you've had, whether that's to help the incoming officers, to help yourself better understand, what can I improve on for a next leadership role in my job, or that kind of thing. Just considering what has worked and what hasn't. So after you consider those, you want to do some brainstorm lists. So incoming officers, you want to write down some general questions that you have about the organization, the programs, how the processes work, any general questions that kind of come to mind, and any concerns you have about the role. You are thrown into a rather large and important role in an organization, having a position, being in charge of certain things. So I'm sure you have concerns, so make sure you write them down so you don't forget. And for outgoing officers, you want to just kind of gather any important knowledge accumulated over your time, whether that's important documents, emails, people to contact, logins, bank account information, spreadsheets, the Constitution, whatever you think has been essential to helping you do your position will help others do their position or get a start as to where to go. So compiling that information, those documents are extremely essential. So after you do your brainstorming list, you want to have a one-on-one meeting with each other. So the leaving officer, the current officer, and the new officer that's coming into that role. You want to ask questions and advice between each other. The incoming officers want to ask those questions that they brainstormed. The outgoing officers, you want to give them those documents, give them that advice. You also want to wrap up any unfinished business. So if the outgoing officers are still planning next year's formal or next year's events, give them what you've got so far so they don't have to start scratch and be like, hey, this is where I'm at in this process. Here's the next few steps. It's on you now, but I gave you all my information that I know that you can successfully finish this task and make sure it's done correctly. Like I mentioned, you want to hand off any necessary documents and materials. And just doing this helps the new officer feel more comfortable in their role, feel like I've been given all the resources, I can do this role. If I have questions, I can always ask them quickly, but they don't feel responsible for trying to figure everything out themselves. They have someone else that has kind of guided them and started them on a path of success. And it also helps create closure for the um, outgoing officers with their position, as they've spent so much time and dedication in their position. Having that closure is important so they can move on and feel comfortable that those taking over will do the best job possible. The exiting officer, so the outgoing officer, will probably do most of the talking. It might go back and forth with questions, but you especially want to cover the organization's constitution, bylaws, go over a list of basic annual procedures with calendars. So saying, oh, in October we start preparing our SUFAC budget for the treasurer or the president's. In August, you gotta reserve your room type situation. So whatever a calendar looks like for your position, giving them that. You also want to turn over any member and officer contact lists, as they'll be essential when it comes to starting up in the fall and having that list to email people and get people coming back to meetings again once we return to school. Like I mentioned, contact information of important people and officers or offices around campus that they collaborate with, or um, just how to get in contact with people for community service, that kind of thing. Financial records is a big one, especially if the treasurer is leaving. Having that transferred over is important. Evaluations of previous and current projects, just trying to see what worked, what didn't, what could be improved upon, where did things go wrong, should they have started earlier, started later planning this, that kind of situation. You want to share any meeting minutes and agendas. So if somebody's new to a secretary position, they're aware of how to do such a thing, but also know of past business that has taken place and are aware of it. So if somebody's like, hey, didn't we talk about this last year? You can find it and pull it up and be like, oh yeah, we did. What do you want to cover about it type situation. Um, any historical records of the organization. This may look vastly different for each one, so whatever you think is necessary. Or just if you have a whole Google Drive, just share the whole Google Drive. It'll be a lot easier. And you also want to make them aware and understand the use of Connect and WebEx, being sure they can utilize it very well, know the basics, know what's important for the organization to succeed. So here's a few questions to ask each other when you're doing your meetings. You can ask which events were successful, when should planning start for each event, which events were unsuccessful and were they poorly run or poorly attended, or were they poorly planned, what worked, what didn't, what could have been improved upon, why didn't it work, and how to change that in the future. How could your organization improve its events, like I just mentioned? What did your organization do to recruit? This is essential because every year some individuals graduate and they're gone, and new freshmen come in each year looking for something to get involved in. So you want to figure out what worked and what didn't for that, because it is a non-stop thing for organizations here on campus. You also want to ask, why did your members stay and become active within the organization? Was it the events? Was it the meetings? Was it the food? Was it just the community service? Figure out what made them stay and be active. You also want to consider, why specifically did your new members stay and become active? because new members are essential when it comes to the vast variety of organizations we have on campus. So getting new individuals to stick with an org, be engaged and active in it is essential. So consider, why did they stay? What happened last year that they made them stay, made them want to stay and be active, and try to replicate that and continue that because it worked. So don't break the wheel if it isn't broke. If something still works, you can make it better, but don't try and reinvent it, because if it already works, you're just doing a lot of extra work that might not necessarily be needed. So post one-on-one meeting, the new executive board should meet. So this new executive board could include new officers, but it also could include ones that got reelected into their role. So it could be a mix of experienced individuals and brand new individuals that have never held an executive board meeting. So in this meeting, you should discuss the upcoming semester or year. You should definitely establish a calendar of events so you can start planning those and being like, hey, by this date, we need to have this done. And by this date, we can share stuff out, that kind of stuff, and just making sure you have things set in stone and you have deadlines to meet. You want to have meeting details. So during the semester, we're going to meet bi-weekly on these days, and this is what we're going to talk about at each meeting type situation. You also want to discuss any potential future constitutional changes. These can be rare, but they can also be essential with thinking about, oh, we forgot to add this, or this needs to be changed because this is really outdated type situation. So thinking about those. You also want to think about solutions for possible challenges, whether that's challenges of someone not 100% pulling their weight, or we are struggling with recruiting, or we cannot plan events, whatever challenges may potentially come up. You also want to ensure that if you have a national chapter, you want to make sure you fulfill those national expectations for your organization. So whatever that looks, adding those into your calendar, adding those into your meetings, whatever needs to be done to make sure you fulfill those national expectations is essential. But you also want to create expectations for one another, so you're not, one person isn't all doing the work, or one person isn't slacking and you didn't tell them that you were expecting this out of them. Just having a clear communication between each other is essential when it comes to transitioning and starting off a year right as an e-board. So then you want to have a final meeting after the one-on-ones, after the new board meeting together. You want to have a final meeting of all of the officers, outgoing, exiting, and incoming. Every single officer that was on e-board, executive board the current year, and the ones that just got elected or re-elected. You want to review any other additional questions or needs that they have to be able to start the year off right. This is technically optional, but it is incredibly beneficial to, instead of communicating back and forth via email or text, you can just have a one-on-one meeting to clear up any potential questions and just further build that trust in them. And again, wrap up officer transitions so that they can start off their year right and make sure that they can do the best for the future of the organization. So thank you for watching this e-lead. Our contact information here is on the screen. So if you have any additional questions about this topic or anything else, please feel free to reach out to us. Other than that, have a great day, and I hope to see you soon.